Good morning and welcome to MCon 2012. My name is Ben Duda. I'm the Executive Director of AmeriCorps Alums. I'm very excited to talk to you today about millennials and millennial volunteering. Let me tell you a little bit about AmeriCorps Alums first. So since 1994, there's over 775,000 alumni of AmeriCorps for programs that you're familiar with, like Teach for America, City Year, Habitat for Humanity, and small organizations from cities and towns all across the United States. AmeriCorps Alums is the only nonprofit network for alumni of all of these programs. We are an enterprise of Points of Light, which is a national nonprofit that has a portfolio of organizations that put citizens at the center of change. And we firmly believe that these alumni of AmeriCorps National Service really represent the leadership pipeline for the 21st century. And so hopefully the insights that we've gained as a national network of alumni who have done some really significant national service have represented a really firm commitment to volunteering, hopefully are beneficial to those of you in the audience today. So a little bit more about us first. We do four main things at AmeriCorps Alums, which is convene alumni of AmeriCorps programs locally in chapters, provide them leadership resources and opportunities, provide member benefits and career opportunities to advance their post-national service career, really leverage their volunteering experience, and finally elevate their stories and position them as advocates for the benefits of national service. We're 57 chapters in cities and towns across the country, and those chapters engage in a variety of activities, whether it's leadership events at City Hall in Philadelphia in the top left, and then going clockwise, networking activities that happened after work hours in Sacramento, service project we did for MLK Day here in Atlanta, or getting a state senator, like our chapter did in Connecticut, to come out and speak to a group of volunteers and share their stories of service with him in support of AmeriCorps and national service. Another thing we do nationally is really try and elevate stories from the field, and I think this is where we can start to really think about how this is different from millennials. So the first picture there on the left is Congressman Heinrich from New Mexico. He's an AmeriCorps alum himself, and the piece of paper he's holding says AmeriCorps works and gets things done. This was a part of a campaign that we did for AmeriCorps Week. We really wanted to highlight where alumni had taken their service and in what career paths they were following. We also use it as an opportunity to kick off our Pinterest page. So as we kind of think specifically, and as organizations and participants are thinking about how do you use this kind of array of social media tools and other resources at your disposal, this was the strategy we used. And so having Congressman Heinrich participate was kind of really the cherry on top of a campaign that brought in over 100 different submissions of folks who were working at food banks and legal aid associations for national nonprofits, local organizations, public sector or private sector, but was really a way for us to reinforce a theme that we believe in, that AmeriCorps experience really propels you into important careers, but also was an opportunity to really use a new medium that we hadn't tried before, which was Pinterest. Picture on the top right is a woman by the name of Vandana Goyal, who's the executive director of a nonprofit in Mumbai, India, that works with children from some of the most impoverished neighborhoods in that community, and really is something that we featured Vandana's story and feature stories consistently on our blog of where alumni are going. And so the blog is really that longer form medium where we can just tell a specific story and gave Vandana an opportunity to tell her story of why her service experience in AmeriCorps was important, what she was doing now, and why she believes so strongly in that mission, and make that connection as a way to engage our alumni community in something tangible. So bringing another voice from the community so that it's not the AmeriCorps alum staff who's consistently articulating what we believe in our blog. And on the bottom right is a video that we made as part of an advocacy campaign in support of AmeriCorps last fall. And it was called Time to Save AmeriCorps. The really important message for us there, and one that we felt was being missed in Washington, was that AmeriCorps really is a bipartisan initiative that has a strong history of support from every president, from President George H.W. Bush in the late 80s through current President Obama. And so we wanted to document that articulation of support in a 2-minute video. This was a foray into YouTube for us, a medium we hadn't kind of utilized significantly, and a good way for us to, again, kind of find the right medium, find the right message, and put something out there and see how our community responded to it. So now, based on kind of that quick insight into our organization and our perspective, our kind of point of view, point of engagement with millennials, I did want to kind of hit on some high-level themes, kind of ahas for me as it pertains to kind of millennials as a community. And I think the first one I want to start with is there's no such thing as a millennial, and what I mean by that is there's no real blanket that you can put, or generalization that you can put, because millennials really are the most diverse generation we've seen yet in this country. And I think really this question that comes from the Millennial Impact Report highlights this, and hopefully some of you are laughing as you read ahead to the answers, but I think the question was very soundly grounded. Are you a technology hipster? Which kind of these new technology applications, and the choices were Google Plus or Skype or Pinterest, some of these emerging social media platforms. And their responses really highlight that, that assumption of kind of one size fits all is grossly mistaken. So the first one, just appalled by the language. And so, kind of a funny way to say it, but, that language just doesn't really resonate to that individual. So while some may identify as a hipster or technology hipsters, others don't see any of themselves in that term at all. The second response is that person kind of flips it entirely and says more in-person opportunities and events. If we want to think that everyone's going towards technology, this person's actually saying, no, we're not. We're actually going the other way. We want to be in person, in community, have that face-to-face. And so that might have challenged our assumptions as we kind of did a deep dive in this data. And the third response was, maybe nonprofits are using this, but they won't find me there. So this might be something that you're thinking about, but it doesn't really apply to me. And so I wanted to share this for two reasons. One, because I thought it was funny. I thought the question was kind of humorous. I thought the answers were even more humorous. But I think the second thing is, and I think this will be a theme that we hear throughout the day, is that it's, we make generalizations at our own peril. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that there's learning that we can do, and the survey data is guiding and instructive, and the demographic data is guiding and instructive. And, the things that even I will say as kind of a point of view are a perspective, but they're one perspective. And clearly this is a really dynamic audience that we're talking about. So as we think about millennials and volunteers, and especially putting on the lens as someone who did do AmeriCorps National Service and is surrounded by a community of individuals who've done AmeriCorps National Service, I do think that there's a couple key points that I want to make. And first is I think it's really important to ground ourselves, our organizations, our communities, in the fact that now more than ever, volunteering is really an integral part of a growing up experience, and particularly that high school experience. We see many high schools across the country that require a set amount of volunteer hours before graduation. I know I had to, and I know that's even more prevalent, and the required hours are even more increased than they were in previous years. I think the second point, and again, this is from a point of view of my work with AmeriCorps alums, but there's an overwhelming interest in serving. Some people call AmeriCorps full-time volunteering, but this national service opportunity has really, this generation is really smitten by this opportunity. So we see in the last 2 years, in 2011 and 10, we saw over 1 million applications come in for AmeriCorps programs, AmeriCorps opportunities, which is really an astounding number. The sad fact is that there were only about 80,000 slots available in each of those years. So there were a lot of individuals who were seeking that full-time service opportunity that didn't have that opportunity. But I think it does reflect a little bit of the DNA of the community and individuals, really that desire to respond to the needs that they see in their communities through an active service experience. And I think some of that, I touch on this in my next point, is that's driven by recent history. If we look at the age range in which millennials have grown up, really some incredible things have happened just in the last 10 years. We look at 9/11. We look at Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. We look at the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. These are all things that have happened in the last 10 years. And really, again, just as much as we talk about that high school volunteering as part of the DNA of millennial generation, I think, it's impossible to avoid the impact that these experiences have had on the community. And I think that manifests itself in really very real ways. Many sat and looked at the footage of Hurricane Katrina and the impact that it had, the disproportionate impact it had on some of the most isolated and impoverished communities, and said, that bothers me. What can I do about that? How can I change that? And so, the recovery of New Orleans and the stories that are being written there are tied to the impact and the role that the responders, the volunteers, the individuals who came because they wanted to do something, they wanted to help, they wanted to be part of the solution, and they've chosen to stay. And so it's really, I think, this ongoing, fascinating examination of kind of the human spirit, to see the communities and individuals who are part of New Orleans' recovery and writing this new chapter in the history of New Orleans. And I think similarly, I know, my personal story with 9/11. I was in Buffalo, about 8 hours west of the city. I had just completed 2 years of NCCC experience. I had some Red Cross certification, and so that gave me an opportunity to be a responder to 9/11 and be a skilled volunteer that could come down and be a part of recovery in the Ground Zero footprint. That wouldn't have been able to happen if not for my AmeriCorps experience, but also was very much my response and what I wanted to do. And I think folks that might have been younger than me that were coming up looked at that and said, similarly, how do I volunteer? How do I give blood? How do I volunteer in my local community? How can we raise supplies and other things that the first responders needed that we can then send down to Manhattan? And so I think, these are really important things to kind of keep in mind from our organizations and our perspectives. And finally, I think this community is incredibly diverse, more diverse than any generation that we've seen in our country's history, and it's across all different demographical and points of reference. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind as we think about our volunteer strategy or millennial engagement strategy, that there's really an expectation that there'll be a diverse participants, experience, and voices. And so that, there is, again, there's not a one-size-fits-all, but there's also a real expectation that the communities that are coming out to volunteer, the volunteer opportunities are diverse, are inclusive, are really representative of that individual's perspective and point of view. I think nonprofits like Kaboom, Habitat, do this really well because their volunteer experiences include the local communities. They include the individuals who will benefit from the home or the playground. And I think more nonprofits are moving in that direction where you're not creating an experience where you come in on a bus, volunteer when no one is looking, and come out on a bus, take a couple pictures, and that's your impact, but really that it's a community engaged process, a community driven process, really embracing the asset-based development principles that are existent in that community. I think the third point is, and I have a funny quote to kind of demonstrate this here again, but millennials will see and they expect the truth. And so this is a story that I was told about 12 years ago now. An individual said, I had to build a wall on a service day. I think it was Global Youth Service Day maybe, or some service day, so that an elected official could come in later in the day and knock it down with a sledgehammer. One, I think that's just really batters the morale of a community, of a volunteer. But two, and more importantly, you won't get away with that anymore. And that goes to my second point, which is as we see kind of mobile use increase, and then your organization is kind of thinking more and more about a mobile strategy, what we created is a feedback loop that's more instantaneous, rigorous, and consistent. So if that's a strategy that you're thinking about for your next service project as a way to get your local elected official or someone from the corporate sponsorship team to come knock down that wall, do so at your own peril, because that may very quickly get out on Twitter or Facebook and run away from you. And so I think it's thinking about what's the more genuine process, and probably connects back to my previous point. about diverse kind of experiences and participants, and thinking about how can that elected official, how can that funder, how can that dignitary, how can that VIP be more genuinely integrated in the process? Because then the flip side will happen. You're volunteering side by a mayor. You might not have even known that that was your mayor or your council person, but that individual now has some shine that then they'll share out and create a halo that your organization will benefit from. So I think it's really important to think about. And I think that same feedback loop really requires us to think about leading transparent organizations. And you have no choice but to embrace communication, all the different communication mediums. And we all know some of the recent stories just from the nonprofit sector itself, but I think part of that is that it's a very connected, very diligent, in a community that isn't going to be fooled. They see genuineness very clearly, and so rather than kind of pull a story from the nonprofit community that we're familiar with, or name names or shame organizations, I thought a great way to illustrate kind of genuine communication would be to look at some mayors. I studied public policy and had opportunity to serve on a fellowship with Mayor O'Malley in Baltimore, and so my other hat is definitely rooted in kind of a closet urban planner. And so if I look at Mayor Nutter and how he uses Twitter, Mayor Nutter's the mayor of Philly, just very engaging. And I don't know, looking at these 3 tweets, or if I pull up his Twitter feed today, I don't know if it's Mayor Nutter who's actually writing all of these. I have my suspicions, but there's a voice there. There's a genuineness. I feel like in following Mayor Nutter, I have a sense of his leadership style as well as what's really going on in Philadelphia. Similarly with Mayor Slay in St. Louis. You'll even note he goes an extra step in this hashtag FGS. Those are his initials. He's saying, this is my actual voice, me saying things specifically. The third one down, good work notice, that might be somebody from the staff. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but that's okay. And so then if I look at Mayor Slay and I look at a similar sized city, which is my hometown, so I feel like I can name names, Buffalo, this is clearly not a voice. This is clearly not a feed. I posted 3 pictures on Facebook. Here's the second one is something else that kind of auto-generated from Facebook. So I'm looking at one particular medium, one particular way to engage your constituents. And if we take these learnings from the public sector, we can very easily apply them to the nonprofit sector and see, there's a way to be genuine and real, and then there's a way to not, and it's reflected. Buffalo and St. Louis are similar size, probably have similar demographic communities. Mayor Brown has about 1,100 followers. Mayor Slay has 15,000. It's a pretty big difference. And I don't think that there's 15 times as many mobile users in St. Louis as there are in Buffalo. So I think it really speaks to the strategies that these 2 elected officials are embracing. So if we move on, I do want to apply some of these learnings to our organization and how we think about millennial audience, because our audience is largely millennials. AmeriCorps started in 1994, so AmeriCorps members are consistently or predominantly 18 to 24 when they serve. So that means our audience is 20-somethings and 30-somethings. And as AmeriCorps has grown, that means more recent alumni in greater numbers. There isn't a millennial demographic that really drives our strategy and drives how we do what we do. And so one of the things that I learned, and I've been in the role for a little over a year now, is it was really important for us to be flexible rather than rigid. We have a website where you can create a profile and make friends and send messages, and we were trying to funnel everybody through one place, and I think we decided, and hopefully rightly so, to be in lots of places, to kind of meet people where we were. So we have our online community, but we'll also be consistently in your inbox. We'll also be on Facebook and Twitter, Pinterest. LinkedIn has been an incredible growing community for us, and this just gives us an opportunity to reach folks in different mediums and allow to engage them in the ways that they would like to be engaged. So LinkedIn really is a professional networking place. So as alums are thinking about their life after AmeriCorps, as they're thinking about how do I transition my service skills into the workplace, that's the conversation that's happening there. And I think the third realization is our aim to be consistent, honest, and transparent, because you have to be. That's kind of our time in this country, just generally, and at where technology is. But I think specifically in being genuine and seeking to engage in a millennial demographic. And so, things like saying our monthly newsletter is monthly. We name our mistakes. We made a mistake in our most recent newsletter. We sent out the follow-up. We made those addendums. We communicated that. And then, I think the third thing, and most specific for us, because there's 775,000 alums, but we have 3 full-time staff people, so we use our community to tell our story with us. And that looks like these are 10 of our chapter leaders from cities and towns across the country, and as a staff that has 3 full-time staff people, all of whom happen to be male, having a diverse, an additional layer of activity and engagement allows us to be more dynamic and more inclusive than we might be if we kind of look narrowly at our full-time staff. And that similarly reflects how we think about our kind of continuum of engagement. And so making sure that we have service project opportunities available in the communities, making sure that chapter leadership is kind of an ascending opportunity, making sure a recently conceived advisory council that we have has a deeper level of engagement. And so, I think your organization thinking about what does that continuum look like. And I think with the third piece, for your board of directors, really thinking about creating space for a millennial voice. They might not have the treasure that your other board members have, but they have the time and the talent, and really embracing that. And so I want to touch on a couple quick innovative strategies from other organizations. The first of which is Citizen Schools, which is a national nonprofit based in Boston. And their real innovation is creating their apprenticeship model, and it really captures the spirit of millennials, because law firms in the city of Boston are kind of across the board engaged in this law and government apprenticeship. And that means the incoming associates, which is kind of at the lowest level of the pecking order, has the opportunity to serve in an extended volunteer opportunity for 10 to 12 weeks with middle schoolers in the Boston community. And so that gives a real added benefit, a real added layer, a level of deep engagement for those mid-20-something junior associates as a way to give back to their community and add some rigor and dynamism to their work experience. C-Click Fix, I hope you're familiar with, is a nonprofit organization that allows citizens to really be involved in the maintenance and upkeep of their communities. So you can report potholes, you can report full trash tanks, and really create a feedback loop with your local government. Really innovative stuff, and I think this is kind of at the other end of the continuum. So really kind of instantaneous, small-scale volunteering, but volunteering nonetheless, and really important to capture. As I mentioned before, AmeriCorps alums is part of Points of Light, which kind of has a portfolio approach, and one of the organizations in our portfolio is Generation On, and this is their campaign that they've launched this summer, and really looking for individuals to respond. And this is targeted more towards teens and tweens, but I think at that bottom of the end of the millennial demographic, but really guiding to our conversation today, where you pick a cause, you pledge, you act, and you report. And you do this all through this online interface. And it's really an opportunity to engage folks in the issue that they want to, engage individuals with an opportunity to choose different options, and then report that back through the website. So a real interesting strategy and interface. Another example comes from Hands On Nashville. So the Hands On Network, 200 volunteer centers across the country. And in Nashville, they've really created a regional hub and collaborated with other nonprofits in Nashville using this volunteer database app in the top left. So that technology allows the individual to search for volunteer opportunities in Nashville across all different nonprofits. This isn't proprietary to Hands On Nashville. This isn't ones that their organization is supervising or leading. This is really inclusive of their partners and organizations across the city. And so really gives your organization and your community opportunity to use a widget to find volunteer opportunities and get involved in the areas and in the issues that you most see a connection with. And so I think a real innovative strategy, and again kind of embraces that millennial spirit and what a millennial community is looking for. If we look to the Points of Light Civic Incubator, I think a really interesting strategy to engage this millennial spirit of entrepreneurism. So Points of Light is looking to create a ventures in residence program and an accelerator that's going to kind of take social entrepreneurs and their ideas and help move them further faster. And one example of this is FuseCore, which is an organization based in San Francisco that's taking private sector leaders and putting them into government sector challenges. And this is a real interesting innovation for two reasons. One, because I think it follows that same spirit of trying to apply different levels of thinking and capture that entrepreneurism. And secondly, I think it really reflects a millennial sense that we will not be segmented by a particular role, by a particular issue area, or even by a particular sector. So I can take my private sector experience and be successful in government. I can be successful at a nonprofit and really leverage that in the private sector, as we see with AmeriCorps alums who are really active in Fortune 500 companies in their corporate service responsibility departments. So I think that incubator, that embracing of entrepreneurship is a really interesting phenomenon that we're tracking. And then finally, the Civic 100, which is a survey of Fortune 500 companies to really think about how are they thinking about leadership in civic engagement. And I think this is interesting for two reasons, because I think one, it's kind of the corollary to the Millennial Impact Report in some ways, and kind of capturing data from the government or from the for-profit side rather than the millennial side. But I think it's also really a response to that interest in data. It's really in response to that interest that millennials have in kind of a genuine leadership, real leadership, and articulation of how even organizations that are driven by the profit motives, that are beholden to shareholders, how are they thinking about community and civic engagement? So as this is rolled out in the fall, I think it really is representative of what millennial workforce is looking for in response to a community that has that interest and is ascending into leadership positions. So you could really envision individuals making strategic choices for their career, for their volunteering, for whom they're looking to for corporate philanthropy, based on their response and how they're evaluated with a tool like this. And so this is convened by the Points of Light Corporate Institute, by the NCOC, which is a fantastic organization based in Washington, the National Conference on Citizenship, and by Bloomberg News. So you know, this has some real stature in the community. I think it's going to be really fascinating to follow. So you know, that was my real opportunity to kind of give my overview of the millennial generation and really how I see that community up close in my work with AmeriCorps alums and our national network of individuals who served in AmeriCorps, but also really tried to bring some ideas and instances from organizations and activities from across the country. So I hope you found that helpful. I hope we've been able to engage in the chat, and would really look forward to continuing this conversation through these mediums that are listed here and after this presentation today. So thanks very much. Thanks to Derek and Carrie for convening such a wonderful conference, and so excited to hear from my colleague at Do Something as well today. So thank you.